with an adaptation of a novel this time. Their first, an adaptation of Cormac McCarthy's No Country for Old Men. Guys, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having us.
I've got to ask, what drew you to Cormac McCarthy? Because in a way, it's almost like he wrote a template for a movie you guys might have done, but in other ways, it's very different.
Yeah, well, we'd always liked Cormac's stuff. We'd read not all of his, several of his novels before this, but actually this didn't come up at our initiative. Scott Rudin, the producer, brought us the novel, actually before it came out, in galleys, thinking we might be interested in doing it, which we were. I guess it is kind of our kind of thing somehow. I don't know, the regional nature of the story, I don't know. Whatever reasons, which we didn't really even articulate between ourselves, it really appealed to us.
It's only retrospectively, actually, for us that we realized that there were things that in this story that were sort of similar to things that we'd done before.
And I'm imagining that sort of real strong regional sense would appeal to you guys too, because region and places are so important to you.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know why we've set so many movies in, either in Texas or in the sort of the South. It has always appealed to us. It was one of the things when we read the novel that was, we were actually familiar with the area that the novel is set in.
Oh, you spent time there before?
Yeah. And to go down there and make a movie there about that place was one of the sort of appealing aspects of the whole thing. That's very true.
Part of it is, it's also a regional thing. One thing about the South is people talk a lot. I mean, especially, in Texas, well, everywhere it's, you make a point with the story. It's kind of partly, again, a regional thing.
It's another story set in Texas. Our first movie was set in Texas, although a very different part of Texas. The Texas of No Country for Old Men is West Texas.
Although it's almost the same era.
Almost the same era, that's true.
Yeah, since we've gotten older, the first one was contemporary, and this is a period piece.
Yeah. The funny thing about doing a period piece of that period in Texas is, especially in the area between sort of, El Paso and Odessa, is that nothing really has changed very much. Not even the automobiles in the last 25 years. You don't have to do a lot of sort of art direction in terms of bringing it back into that period.
It's actually something we worried about because it's odd. Placing the story as a period story because, when I carry the Josh Brolin character is supposed to be a Vietnam vet, but he's whatever in his 30s. It all seemed like it might be an oddity for the audience if we didn't peg it in terms of period, and yet, as Joel says, there's nothing really visually that's going to tell you that it is 1980 as opposed to contemporary. Something we fretted about a little bit. We did put a pull tab on a can of beer. We thought, well, that'll kind of say it.
But one of the things that sort of fascinates me about this too, though, is that the movement, the sort of chase aspect of it, you guys emphasize. Because it plays a bigger part in this than it does in the book.
I suppose that's true. It does by virtue of the fact that the book is sort of checkerboarded with these chapters that are first-person sort of ruminations of the sheriff, these just internal monologues, him thinking about things, some of them not even directly related to the story. And, one of the first things that we sort of had to decide, because it's such a fundamental part of the book, was when we were adapting it, was what to do with that. And for the most part, it's not there in the movie, except to the extent that we incorporated parts of it that we thought were important to sort of maintain the voice of that character in dramatic scenes, but particularly scenes the sheriff has with his deputy sort of throughout the movie.
But most of it we dumped. Most of it just, there isn't room for everything, and it was a kind of an awkwardness figuring out how we were going to render those long monologues. We completely missing from the movie is the whole sort of discussion of, or not a discussion, it is a monologue, the sheriff's experiences as a World War II veteran,
yes, right.
Which was interesting in the book. It parallels, the other characters being a Vietnam veteran, and it's interesting that they both sort of, and relevant that they've both sort of seen the worst, but what are you going to do?
it also parallels, it sets up that atmosphere, it sets up that place that they've all been through these kinds of things, and it's kind of like a war zone there too.
Well, that's true.
Right.
And there's even a suggestion, more than a suggestion, in the book, which puts the Woody Harrelson character in the movie, Carson Wells, and the bad guy, Chigurh, as being sort of ex-military people as well. It's a more pronounced thread in the novel. And as you said, I mean, by eliminating that, it does essentially sort of foreground the chase aspect of the story to a certain extent. That's true.
It's the treatment, I guess, of Joel and Ethan Coen. We're talking about their new film, No Country for Old Men. I was fascinated that you guys had eliminated that because, to me, that felt kind of central to it, but I didn't realize until I saw the movie how easily discardable it was, because it was all about these war veterans being at war again, really, and in some ways how that was kind of inescapable for them. And you had the sheriff kind of being that voice of experience who had some distance on it, and the other guys were still in the thick of basically a battle. At what point did you decide to discard that? I mean, how early in the adaptation?
Early on when we were writing it. I mean, really, first thing, we as we were kind of struggling with the idea of how to retain some of the feeling of those monologues of the sheriff, we kind of became resigned to the fact that was like too big, that the war experiences thing was too big a thing to treat either as a kind of voiceover monologue or what. I don't know. It was a puzzle.